Hi, this is Donald, and this is my review of the completed poems of W.B. Yeats. William Butler Yeats was a famous English poet, playwright, philosopher, and politician during his career, which spanned from 1889 to his death in 1939. Definitely still during the era where people wore multiple hats. You didn't just have one career. You typically, or some of the more famous people had multiple careers. Yeats is known for his Irish-inspired poetry, and he actually even won a Nobel Prize in Literature in 1923. Reading up on it a little bit online, it also seems that he had different stages and styles of poetry and writing in his lifetime. As a disclaimer, I only read about half or 2/3 of this book. It's quite a long book, almost 450 pages long, and if you're used to reading poetry, you can understand that that is a lot of poetry to read, and I don't think there's any need to force yourself or pressure yourself to read that. Poetry is supposed to be enjoyable. I particularly liked the first third of the book. It had a nice, dreamy, magical fantasy, knights and queens kind of feel to it. And I really like that kind of poetry. And it's not a type of poetry I really read very often, even though it's a type I really enjoy. So that was my favorite part of the Yeats poems. The second part of the book, the middle part of the book, there are some poems I enjoyed, but I really started to not care for too many of the poems. The style did change for sure. A lot more realistic, imaginary people, but realistic scenarios instead of the fantasy, romantic style. From a historical point of view, maybe the first part of the poetry, first phase of his life or career, was the era of elegance and ornamentation, in a sense. The late 1800s, great wealth, not really too many wars going on at the time. Then the second stage, you can look at it as a time of World War I, so great conflict and suffering and confusion. And the third phase would be the Gilded Era or Depression era and economic hardship. So that might be part of why the styles of poetry differed during his life. Personally, I wish I had bought a more condensed version of his best written poems, because although it's nice to have the completed works, and everybody, or most people I feel like, want the completed works or everything so they don't miss out, right? The fear of missing out. But there were quite a few poems that I didn't care for, and I just kind of glanced over and just skipped because it wasn't really doing anything for me. If I were to go back, I would definitely get a condensed version, even half the size, maybe 200 pages, of his best works. Would I recommend this book? I would recommend the poetry of Yeats, but I would definitely recommend you get something more condensed and more of his best works. And that concludes my review of the completed poems of W.B. Yeats. Hope you enjoyed the review. It's a pretty short one this time, but let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you.